It used to be called the intranet, right? Every company said, yeah, this whole like networking thing is super interesting. We're going to set up a private intranet for our company. And then they realized, okay, we're actually way better off with the public intranet. Let's just plug in and do things.
Right.
The same thing is happening right now. It started off with, remember, the blockchain, not Bitcoin movement. And then it turned into, okay, well, enterprise blockchain. Now it's like, we're not even going to call it any of those things, but we still have a private chain. And then it's going to be, let's link that private chain to the public world, right? And then pretty soon they'll just be seamlessly integrated. That's where we are right now. But the thing is, institutions will not even touch Web3 without privacy because, as much as they have been kind of detractors of our world, there's no way they're going to actually have their private or proprietary operations come into the public domain without privacy.
Welcome back to the Defiant podcast. I'm your host, Vinny, and we're here with Rob Viglione, who is the co-founder and CEO of Horizen Labs, a development studio that's brought a lot of amazing Web3 products to market, specializing in ZKP. Rob, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Vinny.
Yeah, so here in Dumbo, we're ready to really dive into ZKPs and what their role is in Web3 today and what we hope to accomplish in the near future. So ZKPs are often described as a revolutionary technology within Web3, right?
Sure.
What drew you to this technology, and what do you personally find most fascinating about zero knowledge?
I would say beyond the math, the cypherpunk wannabe in me drew me to ZKPs. So a little known fact is, so when Zcash finally brought ZK on chain, right, with what they did with their shielded pool and the ability to have private transactions, it just sparked this, I need to be part of that moment in me.
I want to join that club.
Seriously, and the Zcash club is so cool. But it really is this link from like the old cypherpunk movement to getting on chain. But it was a starting point. And it was a starting point for, okay, we can do anonymous transactions, but that opens the door to many other things. And the idea of actually getting the real world on chain, and by real world, I mean the traditional world that we all know and love, on chain, you need privacy. Like fundamentally, you need privacy. And there's a lot of other characteristics of ZK and cryptography that are important as well. But fundamentally for me, it was all about privacy.
Cool. And something I'm really interested in with zero knowledge is, transparency is a really big tenet of the Web3 ecosystem, but so is privacy, right? So how do you see ZKPs striking a balance between these two, ideologies that could maybe be at odds at times?
One of my dear friends actually yesterday said to me, he said, verifiability without privacy is just surveillance, right? So it's one of these things, again, of like really clicked. I'm glad I said it right because the idea of things being on chain, like a blockchain is a public ledger, right? So let's not get ahead of ourselves and get too fancy about it. We're talking literally a public database where anyone in the world can add information to it and verify that what was added correctly. Now, if we want to actually have a real world stuff like a bank account transactions or financial lives where I Uber every day, to be using this technology, we absolutely need privacy. It has to be a fundamental tenet of it. But I guess the mix though is privacy while still preserving correctness, while still making sure that, okay, like I'm not a member of ISIS, funding like the next terrorist attack, right? And now we have the technology to actually do these things where we can preserve privacy and to make sure that, like horrible things aren't happening.
Yeah, and I think it's very hard for people to kind of cross that line because they say, well, the easiest way to verify information is for me to show you an ID or for me, a birth certificate or something. But like that kind of leaves the door open to you oversharing information.
100%. There's no reason why some convenience store clerk needs to see my home address when I go buy a beer. Right? Like, it really doesn't make sense, and it's no longer needed. But it gets way more pernicious than that because ultimately when we get our credentials into the digital domain, now we're in the world of hackers. We're in the world of nation state hackers. We're in the world of just like a-holes that are stealing our information and trying to steal our money, right? So there's no reason to overshare information in the digital world. Like, in fact, it's not just annoying. Now it's actually pernicious.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing more and more headlines, right, of like hacks going on into like private databases. I feel like I get an email every week about like your data might have been leaked, and then you're like, oh no, like what data is that? If it's a Discover card, we could be talking about social security numbers. We could be talking about
it's a big deal. And now we have, what we're calling in our industry, the wrench attacks. Like this is the wrench attack moment now where people finally realize, wow, having money on chain is fundamentally different. And the security risks that we all take being in this industry are real, right? And the fact that information was stolen from Coinbase about our accounts and whether we have a certain amount of money on Coinbase or in digital assets, it's a big deal, right? So privacy today matters more than ever.
Yeah, we just did a story last week about my wallet getting hacked, which I've been in crypto for 4 years. So part of me was like, yes, 4 year.
You're an OG now, right? You're legit.
I was like, it was bound to happen. I've been branded.
Congratulations.
But one of the coworkers here at the Defiant said, the thing I always do when people ask me about crypto is like, yeah, that's a bunch of scams, man. Like, this is a degen. This is someone who we don't even know what they look like, So privacy is very important to them. And I thought it was really interesting. There are different consciousnesses about privacy and whether or not you want to even talk about if you're in crypto. Right. And then you talk about the Coinbase hack, right? Like you're basically putting it out there like, I'm into crypto, which means I have a wallet, which means if someone steals from this wallet, there's nothing I can do. So there actually is this kind of domino effect when that first piece of information is shared.
There is. And the concept of wealth is just fundamentally different these days. And I don't know how much you want to go down this rabbit trail, but when you were wealthy 20 years ago, right, it's not like someone could put a gun to your head and say, hand over your shares to this company, hand over the title to your land, right? Like it was just different. Now we live in a world where people can say, hand over your private keys. I want your money right now. And you have no recourse.
Well, we just had that dude here in New York having a, less than ideal vacation.
Very less than ideal. Exactly. Poor, Italian fellow coming to New York.
But I do think that's really interesting to think we're not just talking about privacy in the age of digital technology, but also in this crypto world where just the rules are different and the way that we maintain our wealth is different too.
Yeah, so we have to adapt. We know that, and there's always this fundamental tension between not your keys, not your money, right? Where you want complete control of your money, and there's real value there. The way I look at it is we should be like squirrels and putting our money kind of all over the place and just get a little real about it, right? So some of it should be squirreled away where no one in the world will ever know what you have and where it is. Other parts should be in multi-sig addresses that you couldn't touch if you wanted to. Your lawyers would have to get for you.
Right. Well, we have diversification in a different context here in crypto. Google recently adopted ZKPs to verify user ages without having to, type in that information, which I think is great because, I'm willing to dox myself. I got on Facebook when I was 12. I was definitely not a college student and I was definitely not old enough to be there, right? But the internet was so easy. You just type in your thing. It says, no, you can't go in. And then you're like, okay, I was born in the 80s. I don't know.
Exactly. I'm in.
I'm in, right? And so that's kind of one of those things where technically the websites had that step, but it was so easy to get around. It didn't really do anything. So how do you envision ZKPs, evolving to be that thing that we can use for verification online, both in this specific use case of ages, but what else can we use it for? So
you brought up an amazing use case there. And actually, Google used technology from one of our partners called Ligero as well. So it's a Ligero proof system. It's an amazing system because it's very lightweight on being able to generate proofs from any device anywhere, right? And you can think in-browser proofs or from your mobile device. The way we look at it is it's all about cryptography. And cryptography keeps us safe and keeps us private, right? And I think that we're marching very quickly towards a world where we'll have 1 trillion proofs generated everywhere all the time. This kind of continuous pudding of proofs being generated from all of our devices without us even realizing it. Now, these proofs will be really important for Web3 at some intersection, like getting information from off-chain, on-chain for useful things, right? And we can make up useful things like borrowing money from a borrow-lend protocol, right? Is one example. But there'll be many proofs everywhere. And it's just, how can we actually handle this kind of volume? So this is one of the problems that we're tackling at Horizen Labs with one of our products called ZK Verify, actually. because Web3 infrastructure just cannot handle the volumes of proofs that we envision coming, even that exist today, frankly, from different applications that are coming online. You could, at best, verify about 50 proofs per block on Ethereum if Ethereum did nothing but verify proofs, which it doesn't, obviously.
We're talking about trillions.
Exactly, impossible, just literally impossible.
Right. I don't do math, but that math don't work.
Exactly. My math is a little rusty, but yeah, I get it as well, right? So anyway, like, we know we need much better infrastructure specifically for handling proofs on chain.
Yeah, and the other thing I've been thinking about with zero knowledge and with Google taking this step is, Web 2 has data built into their model. Like that's literally how they make money is by taking all this information about us and selling it to advertisers or, other companies. So like, do you think ZKPs could compel such giants to adopt a privacy-centric approach without sacrificing their market dominance?
So it depends. Like if the giants can make money, sure, absolutely, right? I mean,
they can figure out how to squeeze.
You can compel anyone to do anything that they can monetize, right? But I do think that you hit a really important point here. There's a saying of kind of data is the new oil in an age of AI, right? Like we are data generating machines just by virtue of being alive. And a really interesting thing about that is if we can control the data that we're generating, and ZK cryptography is one way to do that, if we can construct the right platforms, then we can monetize that. And we can not just monetize it, we can tune it. We can just click a green checkbox on our mobile device that says, yeah, monetize it in this type of way, right? And just send me a check, well, continuously, right? Send me stable coins continuously, right?
Yes, right.
The age of checks is gone. But I think this is huge. It's a really important point because it inverts that old Web 2 model of monetizing content, like the freemium model from platforms. Maybe it's going to go away, maybe it's not, but we at least now have the possibility of creating something completely different where individuals own their own data. Thus far, people haven't cared. But if we can actually make it super easy, like literally a green toggle on your phone where like monetize my data, I guarantee you I will use a certain set of apps if I can make $1,000 a month, just by like choosing to use those apps versus the old-fashioned Web 2 ones.
That's really interesting because the thing I keep on bumping up against is like specifically with Gen Z and younger millennials where they're like, well, what does it matter? Like, who cares if China has my data? I want to be on TikTok. Like they don't see the security risks, but they also don't see the benefits. And I think what you're describing where someone could, monetize their own data, that could change the conversation.
I think that's the hook, honestly. I mean, like I've been in the privacy space since there was a privacy space in Web3, right? And I will tell you, most people don't care. Like our community, we have very loyal, diehard like privacy advocates who do care, but that's not the majority of Web3, let alone Web 2. Right, so we're not going to win this on an argument of you should care about privacy. We're going to win this on
you should. Okay,
exactly.
Like,
and you can feel
you
it,
should
right?
Get a life. So.
Yeah, exactly. But hey, do you want to make $1,000 extra per month by using these apps? Sure, sign me up.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it kind of fits into the way that the economy is changing. Like we are seeing stagnant growth as far as wages. We are seeing a very competitive job market. And so this idea that we could utilize our information, which big companies are making a fortune off of, like that actually, to me, feels very optimistic for the future.
Well, and it goes to this kind of existential question of in an age of AI, what's the point? Like what type of opportunity do human beings have for earning a living, right? I mean, like the space of things that we can do could either narrow or enlarge, I have no idea. But we know for sure that AI and machines will take more and more of the economic functions in society. Right. So the idea that you can feed that with data in a productive way that you can monetize is actually pretty amazing.
Yeah, and especially, you pair that with the Web3, concept of having the creators own their own content and monetize their own content, whether it's through, NFTs or whatever. Like I do see this as a very productive future. And this is the future where I see crypto not being just a buzzword, like something that people actually use, because that's the biggest problem I've seen. Like you've seen AI adoption skyrocket since ChatGPT came out. Crypto's been around, I mean, arguably since like, late 80s, early 90s, 2009 with Bitcoin, and it's still this niche thing with a bad reputation.
Agreed.
Which, AI potentially should have the worst reputation, I would say.
One would imagine. I think an interesting thing, though, will be that intersection, though. I think so. Crypto is for sure the domain of AI. So AI will not be, doing micropayments and bank wires. There's just no way it's not going to happen. Right. AI will not be doing kind of like paper contracts with anyone that go through courts. AI will be using smart contracts and micropayments on chain, right? So I think that if we do nothing as human beings, AI is going to make crypto massively popular and scalable. But I do agree with you. I think that there is this opportunity for this moment where we can actually start monetizing our content. We can start monetizing the data that we're generating, just monetizing like who we are as human beings. And I'm not saying that in a cheap way where it's kind of like we don't have dignity as human beings, but it's just more like we ought to control more of the economic value that we actually contribute to the world.
Totally. And I kind of see, like as a writer, there has been, this ongoing conversation about like, well, what do we do when the publishing houses just want AI to write a novel? And I'm like, who's going to buy that?
Right.
Like, art is about the human experience.
100% agree with you. Yeah, exactly.
If we can find ways to create the human experience and make that, profitable and valuable, that makes a lot of sense. And it goes to visual art, it goes to music, dance, like all these things.
So I think crypto, smart contracts, cryptography, privacy technology, ZK, and so forth. These are all those things that are at that intersection of where it gets interesting, where human beings and machines work together.
Yeah, and that's kind of the future that we have to embrace. Can't put this back in the box,
No, you can't.
The box is out with the recycling.
The PR Genius is a top crypto PR and growth marketing agency, helping brands globally with expert PR and strategic growth marketing. They've worked with 300 plus projects like Movement Labs and IO.net. Unlike traditional agencies, they charge only on performance. Their services include earned PR opportunities and marketing services to help boost wallet holders and organic X followers. Learn more at www.theprgenius.com.
Can you share any potential use cases for ZKPs in improving cybersecurity and data protection? Maybe things that are less obvious.
Yeah, I mean, so the fundamental kind of infrastructure here that I'm really bullish on is digital identity. So getting digital identity on-chain in a crypto way, not just digitally on, digital period, but on-chain and cryptographically secure is really critical. So the idea of ZK IDs as an example, or these other decentralized ID systems is really important. We're looking at multiple of these use cases where some of our technology can support them, either using them on, so the two products that we have right now at Horizen Labs are we're building a privacy layer for the base ecosystem, with Horizen, kind of a flagship product we've had for a while that we're migrating over to base. And the other is ZK Verify, right? And these are all like ZK-enabled technologies that just make doing things on-chain more secure. I think the fundamental thing, though, when you finally link a digital identity on-chain is you can start parsing data instead of these big honeypots where companies are collecting data. You can start making it granular. And individuals can start publishing information at a very granular level linked to their identity such that if a particular piece of information or data is compromised, it's that one little bit. It's not like this massive honeypot that is really valuable and like honestly terrifying when it's compromised.
Right. I mean, if someone finds out that I love cat videos, like that will not ruin my life.
Right, exactly. Or one specific cat video, right? Yeah, I mean, if they know that you're only looking at cat videos, it might ruin your life. I don't know. Right.
Or make it better. We'll see what they do with that information. Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about the intersection of ZKPs and artificial intelligence.
Sure.
I think that's something that is obviously very interesting.
Yeah.
So AI is making more and more critical decisions daily. And so we're talking about whether or not people get a loan. We're talking about looking at medical records and analyzing scans and stuff. So these are consequential decisions, right? So when it comes to sensitive data like health records and financial history, what role do ZKPs play in ensuring the accuracy and the privacy with AI decision making? I
mean, so it's massive and we're just starting. It is the main point. And literally earlier today, I was asking ChatGPT to help analyze some blood results that I got, right? So, I mean, this stuff is real.
And why wouldn't you? Right. I mean, it sees stuff the human eye can't.
Exactly.
Trends that we're like, what?
It can synthesize information. And then, I have a great doctor, but at the same time, it's really nice to have real-time feedback on things. So I can be better prepared to talk to my doctor. But the point is I need privacy on these things, right? So you can think about like AI or ZK and AI in many different ways. But again, like it comes back to privacy. So if we're going to have any of our private information being used or touched by machines on chain in particular, we absolutely need privacy. There's a whole other domain of ZK and AI for kind of model, like is an algorithm executing properly? Some tangible examples would be if I want to execute like a trading model for like a financial trading model. Like I'm a hedge fund, I'm deploying an on-chain model to start doing some arbitrage on-chain. I may not want the rest of the world to see exactly what model I'm executing or exactly what trades I'm making and so forth.
Or like the volume of
Yeah, exactly. I may not want my trades front run, for instance. So then it comes down to, we can actually implement dark pools on chain, where we can have like private trading on chain. Algorithms can execute privately on chain, right? I could prove that I could backtest an algorithm without showing you the algorithm, right? And show you this cryptographically, like exactly what I'm presenting to you, and I'm misrepresenting it. There's so many ways that ZK factors into AI.
Yeah, that's great. I think another thing that people are a little bit nervous about, we've spent a little too much time revisiting the Matrix, maybe in 2025, but there's a growing concern about AI enabling, a surveillance state, like Big Brother to the extreme. So given the lack of robust regulatory frameworks for ethical AI development, how can ZKPs act as a safeguard against misuse, particularly for training databases?
Yeah, well, I think we have a choice here as a society, right? And the choice is, you have the China model, where everything is completely, completely monitored and, like surveilled and so forth, right? And is controlled by like a single entity.
Right.
Or you have, an option where we have a little bit of freedom in our lives, right? So you can probably guess just the way I'm framing it. I prefer the freedom option, right? But at the same time, AI is immensely valuable, and it's not worth trying to kill it. You can't. Like the Pandora's box is open, right? So what we need absolutely is privacy in AI. We need to make sure that AI is actually behaving properly. We need to make sure it's not mishandling our information. We need to make sure that data that we're generating is either shared because we want to share it, or is it stolen from us, right? So I think ZK, just cryptography in general, is absolutely critical to be part of the stack. And I think we just have to make this choice very consciously as a civilization. Which path do we want to go down, guys? Because at some point, it might be irreversible. Like if you go down a certain path of kind of totalitarianism, we may get to a point where we may not be able to reverse that, because the technology is so good at predicting any type of, counter sentiment.
Any escape.
Any escape, yeah, thank you.
You're like, exactly. That's so cute, we already thought about it.
Yeah.
Go back to your room.
Yeah, thank you, little cute human, right? You're done, right? Erase.
Zap.
Delete, yeah, exactly.
No, not delete.
So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though. It sounds like you're kind of taking the fact that people are going to try to take our data as a given. Would that be accurate?
It's happening today. Very accurate. Thank you. Whether it's a company or a hacker, they're going to try to take our data.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
100%.
And they work very hard for our data.
Yes, they do. They do.
Yeah, but we're not going to give it to them that easy.
Thank you.
So Horizen Labs operates at the intersection of advanced technologies like blockchain and ZKPs. Yeah. How do you see these technologies shaping the future of privacy-centric AI systems? And what steps specifically do you think the industry needs to take to integrate them in a meaningful way?
Yeah, so, standards one, but one thing, and this goes towards when we first got into the industry, it was sort of an all or nothing mentality. And we were guilty of this ourselves. Like we were a bunch of cypherpunk wannabes that were getting on chain as a bunch of anarchists. Let's change the world, make it better, right? And then we very quickly bump up against a reality of, if we want this stuff to be adopted by any type of like court or any type of legal jurisdiction, if we want property rights to be upheld on chain, we know that we need to interact with the legal world, right? In order to do this, I know, a little boring and tiring and so forth.
Got to put that suit jacket back on, I guess.
Right, exactly.
Talk to the lawyers.
I did bring a blazer, a sports coat here. I quickly took it off.
Your armor of choice.
Yeah, exactly. I prefer the t-shirt, right? Repping the company. But now it's no longer binary. We no longer have to have this all or nothing mentality. We can actually just say, like, look, incrementally, it's just better to have more privacy today than we had yesterday. So let's push for that. And let's push for doing it. What we're doing at Horizen Labs is trying to do it like our job, and there are others out there that are doing a fantastic job in the pure cypherpunk way. Our job, though, is actually to blend, the two worlds. And we do that through cryptography, and we're trying to do that in a regulatory compliant way. We could do things like you link a ZK ID to a KYC system, and boom, now you can access a certain like realm of DeFi. that you couldn't previously. And we can actually launch applications like that. We're doing that at Horizen Labs. We're doing this with a privacy layer on base, like we said, with Horizen, and we're doing it with just a pure raw ZK stack that scales with ZK Verify. It's just two fundamental infrastructure layers, and then we're going to release a whole bunch of applications on top of that.
Wow, that's so cool.
I think so. Thank you.
Get 20% APY on ETH with the High Growth Vault by Kelp in one click. HighGain uses blue-chip DeFi strategies with restaked ETH across Aave, Pendle, Usual, and Elixir, managed by strategy pros Ultra Yield and Upshift to deliver highest rewards on ETH, all in just one click. Deposit your ETH, receive HighGain ETH, and stay liquid in DeFi. Trade or use HighGain ETH on platforms like Pendle and Balancer while still stacking rewards. Follow along these steps to get started.
So let's continue on this privacy conversation because I think it's relevant and something people really want to hear about these days. So privacy is often misunderstood in crypto. I'm sure you've gotten, some hate mail or some comments about, well, if you're not doing anything nefarious, why do you need to have privacy, right? And I think it's a bit unfair to link privacy in crypto to just illicit activity, right? Because illicit activity happens everywhere.
Everywhere, and most of it
white-collar crime.
Yeah, exactly.
It's called politics in the U.S.
Or pallets full of dollars, right?
Yeah.
So,
so what are your thoughts on why privacy is a human right?
Wow, that's a big one, actually. It's a really big one. Clearly, I philosophically believe in this, right? But there's a whole world of tangible things where we just cannot or should not do things without privacy. You should not access your bank account where it's just visible to the world. You shouldn't post your bank account to the world. You shouldn't give the world your password to your bank account or to your credit cards and so forth. Clearly, right?
Right.
So we know that we need privacy to get on chain, but then it goes to the institutions that have been making fun of us for the last decade. The JP Morgans of the world, and so the TradFi, without naming names, right? The TradFi world has been mocking us for the last decade, and now they're joining us, right?
I know we're the punks, and you made fun of us, and now you want to buy some Doc Martens. I see you. Exactly. I see you, JP. Oops.
Yeah, exactly. Let's not dox them, right? But we know all these institutions now are coming on chain. They're going to do it one way or another. They're going to first try to come on. It's the common playbook. They're going to try to come online with a private chain, right? And then they're going to realize
that was a good idea. We were just playing.
Exactly.
And then first they buy Bitcoin, right? Then they get the stable coins, and now we're looking at people putting stocks on chain.
Exactly. And it was it used to be called the intranet, right? Every company said, this whole networking thing is super interesting. We're going to set up a private intranet for our company. And then they realized, okay, we're actually way better off with the public intranet. Let's just plug in and do things.
Right.
The same thing is happening right now. It started off with, remember, the blockchain, not Bitcoin movement. And then it turned into, enterprise blockchain. Now it's we're not even going to call it any of those things, but we still have a private chain. And then it's going to be, let's link that private chain to the public world, right? And then pretty soon they'll just be seamlessly integrated. That's where we are right now. But the thing is, institutions will not even touch Web3 without privacy because, as much as they have been kind of detractors of our world, there's no way they're going to actually have their private or proprietary operations come into the public domain without privacy, right?
Right. Well, that's where I remember when I was first learning about Bitcoin, the transparency thing, I was like, well, it'd be great if banks could be transparent.
Right.
But in what world is that going to happen?
Right.
So much of their information and what they do, they want it to be first laced in jargon so that the layperson has no idea what they're talking about. And then secondly, very secret, right? What's happening here is not what's actually happening.
Exactly. It's called alpha and profit margin. They're not giving it up.
No, and why would they? From a green perspective, I wouldn't either.
Right. Exactly.
And so, how do you think we can better communicate the importance of privacy as a human right in the context of Web3 and blockchain?
So we can point out the obvious examples where human rights are trampled upon without privacy, but then the others are just tangible things, tangible things where do you want your bank account on chain? I know I keep repeating myself there, but it's such an obvious one, right? And there's so many obvious examples out there that if we just think about it, and if this function should come on chain, my Uber ride, do I want all my Uber, do I want the world to know exactly where I live? Do I want the world to know exactly where I work or exactly where I'm going to be tomorrow, right? Probably not, right? So these things just have to be private to the extent that we want to get them on chain.
Yeah, and I think there's just so much tension though between like, everybody wants to be an influencer, right? There's this like weird trend now where everybody wants to have their face on the internet and like, look guys, I ate, a chickpea salad for like, it's like the amount of information that people are willing to share is kind of insane.
Yeah.
And they think because it's just, favorite color, like that type of information that doesn't impact everything else. But as soon as someone knows, oh, he or she is LA based.
Yeah.
Well, how much closer can we get to that sensitive information?
Or until 10 years goes by and you want to get a job and all of a sudden, what you were doing 10 years ago, it seemed a little stupid, right? And maybe your employer doesn't need to know that, right? So like we're starting to know this a little more. We have a right to be stupid, right? We have a right to just like have fun and like get out there, right? But now that we live in this digital world, especially the kind of an immutable world of blockchains, like you don't want everything perpetually existing forever that you may not want to be on chain, right?
Yeah, and I wonder, like, because something I am very interested in with blockchain too is like, let's say you make a stupid NFT and then you mint it, right? And then you're like, okay, maybe not, and you burn it. There's still the trace of it though. Like it still exists, in that limbo, like even though you burned it. So do you think that this will change the way people interact with the internet if we're thinking about something being more permanent? Because I think sometimes with like tweets or Instagram posts, they're like, oh, I could just take it down. Like, who cares, right?
Which, it is a misnomer though, because there's an internet archive.
Right, so it's still, right. So they're wrong in that.
Yeah, exactly. So it just makes things a little bit more obvious that they were wrong in thinking that way previously. So really, like in the digital world, we lack so much of privacy and things really are permanent. But you're right. So having an immutable ledger that just is literally designed to exist into perpetuity without being changed just makes it more obvious, right? So I hope that the mentality becomes instilled.
Yeah, I hope so too. Because going back to the Facebook example, I remember thinking like, oh, well, who cares like what Disney princess quiz said I was, 15 years ago, but it's like, that could turn into something else, like what does that say about me? And so I think like, the shift has to be like from that young age where we're not like, oh, just go on the internet and put everything out there. Like,
I mean, like ideally,
be more punk.
Yeah, exactly. Like ideally, the systems that we use that protect us, but we can't count on it.
I would
ideally
venture to say we can count on the opposite.
Yeah, so, I know.
Unfortunately, which is so funny that we talk about like, the US being so like pro freedom and pro individual and stuff, but it's like multiple systems, both at the government level and, the kind of corporate level are actually based on the opposite of that.
It's true. I mean, but again, it's kind of like follow the money. So where can you monetize things, right? And you monetize things by tracking data, exploiting data. I mean, one interesting thing about AI is I think the world of marketing is going to be completely disrupted. And the concept of marketing to human beings will be fundamentally different than the concept of marketing to agents, as an example.
Right.
And for us, it's all about kind of like taking our information and like getting us to voluntarily give away our information for free to participate on a platform like Facebook, and then they monetize it and they want to know everything about us and track it over time and sell it in all these weird ways. It'll be a little different with AI, where AI doesn't care about us. They don't care about our preferences, really, to the extent that they're not.
Human with your bodily needs.
Exactly. It changes. The concept of A/B testing like confuses AI, not helps AI, right? So it's a little different.
That's interesting.
Like A/B testing looks like a website malfunction to AI, versus or like we don't know what we're doing.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, exactly. So things will just change.
Like we already know which one is gonna do better.
Exactly.
We're still doing the scientific method, and then the AI is like, okay, time waster.
It evolves a little bit beyond.
Yeah. Well, as someone who's worked in marketing, that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
But that's kind of so let's talk too about like the KYC compliance, because I remember when it first came out, like KYC for Coinbase or whatever, I was like, that kind of defeats the purpose of using crypto. If now you need all this like verified information, I'm into crypto, how how much I bought, and like
and the IRS
the wallet
sends you
address that I
something
sent it to, like there goes the whole idea.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Look, my thing here, like the squirrel mentality, like I said earlier, is diversification, and Coinbase is part of a diversified, way of holding your assets, right? But it probably shouldn't be your only way. So, but I do think, so KYC is that link though to the kind of legal world that we live in, the world of enforceable contracts by courts and so forth, and also government surveillance, right? And depending where you live and what part of the world, you just have to play ball if you want to access certain things. So I do think that getting KYC, getting regulatory compliance, and intersecting that with the on-chain world is a really critical step that we just have to take. And like the Rob of 10 years ago would have just been completely defiant to this and like, no, let's just go like play in the other category. I think the other category is really critical and must exist as an escape valve for society.
Right.
But I think that the next billion users, though, have to come on chain just to unlock a whole world of other things that can happen to make the world a way better place. And it's only going to happen in a KYC world.
And do you see zero knowledge being the thing that kind of merges those things
It's
together?
critical. Yeah, it's critical because it's the only type of technology that lets you attest to certain types of information without disclosing it. So fundamentally, the whole Eli 5 version of ZK is that I can prove something, some bit of information without sharing that information. So I can prove who I am without telling you who I am. I can prove to you that I'm not on some OFAC sanctions list without telling you exactly who I am. I can prove to you that maybe I have a certain purchase history or net worth, without telling you exactly what it is. So that's critical.
Yeah, and the thing I'm thinking about is like for someone like me who's just like, whatever cypherpunk degen who wants to like buy an ETH for funsies, right? for buying more NFTs because I can't stop. Like the verification makes sense for me, but like how I'm wondering, like, I guess this would be bad for bad actors, right? Because like they'd be verified as, a hacker, like on record. Right?
So it should be bad for bad actors. If we do our job, it should be bad for bad actors because bad actors make all of our lives hell. I have to say, like they make my life harder with my company trying to actually bring good technology to the world that can make all of our lives better and bring up many other people into a modern economic system. But at the same time, like the cynic in me thinks there will always be a chunk of the world that is reserved for bad actors because they'll always find a way to kind of like maneuver their way in.
Right.
But cryptography can both help solve the problem and hide them if not used properly. So I think the way that we brought privacy on chain in the earliest days was actually enabling them to hide and to make use of this technology to kind of, in a way, have better mixers and better ways of laundering money, right? And that's not what we want. So if we're going to actually convince regulators to allow us to come into the multi-trillion-dollar economic system, we're going to need to convince them that we can actually screen out these bad actors.
Goat Network is the first sustainable BTC yield chain, powered by decentralized sequencers using multi-coin POS. Goat's mission is to transform BTC and Doge from passive holdings into active, yield-generating assets through a one-of-a-kind economic model that tokenizes sequencer revenues, unlocking the full potential of BTC-Fi and meme-Fi in a way that's never been done before, and creating new yield opportunities for Bitcoin and Dogecoin holders. Supply BTC or Doge, earn BTC in perpetuity. Get started through our user rewards onboarding portal, onepiece.goat.network.
I'm a bit pessimistic as far as the government's ability to regulate crypto. Like, it just seems to me like they don't understand the technology.
Yeah.
And worse, they don't have a desire to understand it. They're happy to listen to the headlines of bad news and the fake news about all this. So it's like, it kind of feels to me like we have to have companies within our own midst that are building the technology to almost regulate ourselves, and that requires good actors, right?
Yeah. Well, here's where I'll say that we've crossed a bit of a Rubicon as an industry, for better or worse, and that what this last election showed us, beyond the Trump effect of kind of embracing crypto, was the fact that every single candidate that was kind of pro-crypto or endorsed by crypto won across the tickets, right? And this is a really big deal because being anti-crypto is no longer a politically viable approach in the US because you get no voters. There's no constituency that says, I will vote for you because I'm so diehard anti-crypto. It doesn't exist, right? Like, it would be insane, right? And the fact that something like 100 million users are on Coinbase, like, shows you that people have real money, like a non-trivial part of their net worth is now part of crypto. So who's going to vote for you to destroy my assets, right? It doesn't exist anymore. So
or to tax it more aggressively.
Yeah, exactly. But so this is the thing now where it no longer makes sense politically to be anti-crypto. So that's why I think crypto's here to stay. And now finally, like what the last administration got really wrong, and my company like experienced this personally, was like they just attacked crypto for the sake of attacking it. I think because they were embarrassed that SBF was the biggest donor and supporter of a certain party in the US.
Right.
And that was a really embarrassing fact that made them just kind of, I think, knee-jerk reaction of we're going to try to kill this industry. Didn't work for them. It made all of our lives hell unnecessarily, but it put them in a position where now I think crypto is just so much entrenched as part of the system that maybe now we can actually get rational regulation of just being part of the system. We're not asking for special rules.
We're talking about basics.
Yeah, seriously, like don't try to destroy the industry.
Like want fewer people getting hurt. Because like when I noticed my wallet was hacked, I lost like $1,000 worth of ETH, and I was like, that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But like that's the type of thing that someone who can't afford to lose that or loses $100, that could ruin it for them, and they're not coming back because they're like, well, there's no recourse. Like, what am I supposed to do?
Exactly.
What's the point of investing in this or becoming a part of this world when someone can just take it away?
Exactly. So this is where 100%. And remember, at the tail end of the last cycle, so you had the Celsius, scandals. You had SBF with FTX. You had BlockFi. You had there's this kind of wave of bankruptcies.
We had telenovela levels. Too. The SPF thing, I was just like following like
so bad.
Like as a journalist, I was like, oh, I hope this gets crazy. This is my Michael Lewis moment, and then he wrote his book. But I was just like, but that's, I think that's because in crypto we do have that kind of, memeify anything detached kind of vibe, because we know this type of stuff happens, and we know it's not a reflection of the industry at large.
It had nothing to do with crypto. And there's a reason why FTX went offshore to the Bahamas, because we didn't have a proper regulatory environment in the US. So all we're asking for is, guys, like, let's make this. This is a legitimate industry. It's about time you just recognize that and, fold us into the regulatory system.
I mean, every leader I've spoken to in crypto over the last 4 years has been pro-regulation.
Yeah.
And especially when you think about...
It still hurts me to say that, by the way. It still hurts. Like, again,
I know,
the cypherpunk wannabe in me, it was like, I didn't come to this industry because I love regulation. Right?
It feels unpunk, but, we are mature punks, okay?
We're
like the millennial punks in the East Village in Williamsburg who are like, okay, like we want this to be cool, but we still want it to like work.
Exactly.
Because a dead technology is not punk enough.
Like if no one
can use it, what's the point?
Or if 10 million people get scammed and a rug pulled on them, it does not help anyone.
Except for the bad actors who, we're trying to, and especially Horizen Labs is trying to figure out ways to, incentivize them to be good.
Exactly. Economic incentives and cryptography go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you see ZKPs like redefining the way compliance is thought about and how it's enforced?
I do, because now you can actually use cryptography to get real information on chain or usable on chain. So within ZK, there's a product category called ZK TLS, which is super interesting. So TLS, kind of like the transport layer security of the internet, like when you get the secure handshake from your web browser to your bank server, for instance. We can actually now do cryptographic snapshots of information from trusted servers from your bank, for instance, snapshot that information, get it on chain in a useful way, and preserve this with privacy preserving technology, and then do useful things with it, like get a loan as an example. Maybe I can get my next car loan on chain instead of through a bank. Would be super cool, I think, through like DeFi markets.
I would love that, because as someone who's been denied loans from many banks, I would love to use my Bitcoin as collateral and say, bye-bye banks.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, you think only a house. Like,
because
their ideas of what has value, I think, they need to be updated.
They do. So banks can either play ball and get with it or become irrelevant.
Well,
over time. I'm not saying tomorrow.
Not saying tomorrow as much as we'd like to say tomorrow. And so institutional adoption of blockchain has accelerated as traditional finance explores tokenized assets and blockchain-based infrastructure, right? As we've spoken about. How do you see ZKPs playing a pivotal role in ensuring both institutional privacy and consumer data protection?
So there's a few ways. So you've got some institutions like JP Morgan with Connexus is one of their blockchain technology or products they're bringing out there. Goldman has another one called Canton Network. So you're seeing like some of the biggest institutions in the world now actually getting with the technology. Now, I think where these blockchains, so they're obviously going to be very popular for institutions, and that's important, getting institutions to actually start experimenting with the tech and doing useful things. But I think ZK can actually use cryptography to bridge information and assets from these kind of walled gardens into the rest of like the public domain, the public Web3. So I think ZK is absolutely critical for that. In other ways, getting institutions to actually play on-chain in the Web3 sense of it, they're only going to do it through things like dark pools, through being able to like have the same type of technology that they use in the Web2 world on-chain, and that's now exclusively the domain of cryptography. Whether it's ZK, they're experimenting with trusted execution environments. We're actually launching a TE product as well with Horizen on Base. There's fully homomorphic encryption, another category of cryptography, FHE, that's interesting for institutions. But the main point is they all know that in order to play on chain, they absolutely want their own transactions and operations to be private.
It's so interesting because in DeFi, I've seen kind of two main camps of innovation. One is, things that we've never heard of before, like new financial tools and financial models. And the other thing is, simplistically speaking, taking TradFi and making a blockchain version of it, which I used to think was like less hardcore and less interesting. But it sounds, based on this conversation, that that's actually a core requirement as like that stepping stone for the people to be like, oh, I understand benchmark rates. Oh, I understand fixed income, right? So it's like, it might be a little boring to like us crypto maxis, but like, do you see that as just a necessary
I do.
Transitional technology?
I do. So I think it's part of this evolution. It's one of these like transition steps where like, I don't care how they do it, just start getting on chain, right? Just take the plunge, figure it out.
Stop resisting.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to do your kind of internet version of it, by all means, do it, right? But I think they're very quickly going to realize that it's only going to become really valuable. So yeah, they'll be able to do things like instant settlement. They'll be able to do things like within bank payment systems to make it more efficient, sure, right?
I mean, if we can eliminate T+3, like that would already be a revolution. In
How are we still talking about this after like the T0 stuff? And what was that, like 2016 or something? Like that was coming about.
Exactly.
Right? It's just shocking that we're still talking about it. But they should do whatever they have to do, just start getting on-chain. And then once the information's on-chain, once they start thinking about it, kind of exercising their on-chain muscles, I think they'll very quickly realize that the real value is being part of like the global system, not their walled garden.
And will they say that we were right all along?
Obviously. Well, they'll be a little bit.
Their lawyers will find a way to say we were both right.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right. Well, this has been amazing. I'd love to close with a little lightning round. You ready?
Let's do it. I love lightning rounds.
Okay. Favorite existing use case for ZKP?
Oh, man. I'm a finance guy, so for me, it's dark pools. I just love the idea of being able to trade privately, anonymously.
Excellent. Favorite potential use case for ZKPs?
Ooh, potential use case.
And we can go sci-fi. It could be crazy,
I wish I were more creative like you, because I'm going to say something kind of traditional and boring, but super transformational for humanity. Is I would love to be able to get the bulk of this kind of like SME or small to medium enterprise like finance, like digital invoicing, just like mass scale financial transactions on chain, so that we can start unlocking finance for the rest of the world. So you don't have to be part of, developed capital markets like in the US or Europe to actually participate in global finance. So that kind of thing to me is transformational, and it's kind of like get the bottom billion on chain.
Hey, as a Latina, you're speaking my language, because I mean, we've got so many people in this world who there's some that don't even have an internet connection.
Right.
So working on that, but the unbanked populations and the people who don't have financial literacy, like there's just this wealth of information that is being kept away from so many people.
Unnecessarily, unfairly, and now we have the technology, we just have to make it more widely spread.
Absolutely. And lastly, best bit of advice for keeping your data safe online?
Oh, wow. Don't put it online. It's probably the most, useful way to keep it safe. Yeah, exactly. Use ZK. No, but really pay attention. Pay attention to what platforms you're on and what they're doing with your information. I think when it comes to messaging, use services like Signal, right? Instead of, just like plain old SMS.
Right.
Just start taking privacy a little bit more seriously. And then give us a little bit of time to get better products out there so that you can now just have by default privacy in your stuff, start monetizing it.
Well, maybe there's a Horizen Labs messaging app down the
mean,
road. Who knows?
Who knows what's possible out there?
Who's to say?
Right, exactly.
Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for coming in, Rob.
Yeah.
Where can our audience find you and the things that you're involved with?
So I'm on Twitter/X. Rob Viglione is probably one way that you can kind of interact with me. But I mean, just come to like our I'm on Discord, so, you know, like whatever your
Of
favorite
course.
platforms are, right? Come join the conversation.
Where
So,
all ZK items are talked about.
exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
So, thanks for having me, Benny.